Thank you for joining me for today's class on cloud storage. My name is Sean. Today I'm going to discuss several aspects of cloud storage and how they might work for you. Before we get started, I want to note that we'll be talking about real companies in today's class. Neither I nor the Bloomingdale Public Library endorse any of these companies, and the decision on whether to use the service is entirely up to you. They simply serve as examples of the kinds of services that are available. With that, let's get started. First of all, what is cloud storage? Cloud storage is a way of saving files to a remote location and accessing them over the internet. We can compare this to other forms of backup that have been used in the past and are still used by many people. You had physical backups like copying things to floppy disks, DVDs, USB drives, or tape backups that you would then take the media out, whatever device you had plugged in, whether it's the cassette tape that was backed up to, or the DVD or CD, or the USB drive, and put it in a safe location. We also had external hard drives that we would plug into a computer or to a server that we were backing up, and we could have that automated so it would copy everything on a regular basis. All of these are functional ways to have a second copy of the file somewhere other than your computer, so if your computer were to break, you wouldn't lose everything all at once. There are some downsides to those, though. For one, if you had any kind of a disaster at the location of the computer, very often that backup is nearby. If you have an external hard drive plugged into your computer and there's a fire or a flood, that external hard drive might very well be damaged along with the computer. Another big problem is these things often require you to manually go through and back them up yourself. This is something that can be unreliable and is prone for mistakes or oversight. And so anything that can set to be done automatically is usually a preferred choice. Finally, if you do take these physical things to another location, you need to put a lot of time into the actual transfer of them, and you need to have somebody to work with. I've been here at the library for a while, and before we used cloud backup, we used to simply walk over our weekly backups to the village hall, which is, as you might know, pretty close to our building, but still had to carry the tape over there and put it in an envelope and arrange with them when we were going to bring it back. And it was a bit of a hassle for both us and for the people of the village that were kind enough to store that for us. So it can be nice to simply put this in the cloud and access it through the internet. Now, there are downsides to this, and we're going to talk about those. But first, I want to go through some of the different options that are available and why you would consider one or the other. So let's talk about what separates one option from another. First thing that you might think of is cost. And we're going to see a wide variety in costs, either upfront or monthly or annual costs that would be put in front of you when you are working with some of these different services. You will also see differences in storage capacity. How much can you save to them? How much can you back up? This often goes hand in hand with cost, and you'll see a lot of examples of that as we go through. How are the files backed up? Do you have to personally select what to back up and when, or do these things happen automatically? We'll see a couple big differences there in some of the choices that are available to us. What are the recovery or sharing options? How do you get files back if you need them, or how do you send something along to other people if you want to share it or work with them? Again, differences from different services, we'll see some examples there. And then finally, there are some specific services out there that are designed to only work with photos or only work as backup for your mobile devices. Some of them work specifically with different platforms like Android or Apple. We'll take a look at and discuss some of those as we go through. So you're going to see over the course of this class that there's going to be considerable overlap from one option to another. You're going to see a lot of choices where it seems like both could work or one might work a little better for you than the other option there. This is entirely up to you. All users are different. You want to select what makes the most sense for your kind of needs and your costs and what you're comfortable with. Nice thing about this is that you are not buying a physical device, so there is not a lot of upfront cost. So if you try out a service for $5 or $10 a month and decide you don't like it, you can simply cancel that service and try something else afterwards. So there's a little bit more flexibility there because we are not tied down to anything physical. We are working with a cloud service that you access through the internet. The only requirement that we'll have for these is you will need an internet connection for any of these things to work. So with that, let's take a look at some of the different options that are out there, starting with the quick storage and sharing solutions. Here we're looking at Google Drive. Now, when I said a moment ago, we're going to take a look at quick storage and sharing solutions. What I meant by that is we're going to talk about the idea of cloud backup where you have something that you access over the internet And that's a place to quickly add or remove files that you want to have backed up and saved off of your computer in a cloud location, but that you don't need to have necessarily long-term storage or large volume of storage. So we're going to see with some of the examples that I have here, starting again with Google Drive. Other ones that are out there, Microsoft OneDrive, if you are a Hotmail or Microsoft Office user, is something you might want to consider. And Dropbox is another popular option that works well for a lot of people. These are companies where you create an account, you log on to that account through the website, and then you can access your drive. In the case of Google Drive, anybody that has a Gmail account has access to that. And as you can see in the example that I'm giving here, you're given 15 gigabytes of storage for free. So you see right now I'm using 0 bytes of the 15 gigabytes. As you add more and more things, that will slowly fill up and you'll slowly run out of it there unless you remove things that are taking up space as well. Now, you are connected to a cloud location. Think of this as a post office box that you have somewhere remotely where things are being stored. Nice thing about that is that you can access these files anywhere in the world. So it doesn't have to be solely for disaster recovery. What I mean by that is you can use this as a quick way to get to resources that you want to be able to use as you're traveling around, whether you keep track of your budget or checkbook through your cloud drive, or you have a travel checklist or an itinerary for work or anything that you want to keep and you want to be able to access it wherever you go, you can have that stored here. So you can simply upload files that you want to be able to get to, and then anywhere that you can connect to the internet, you can get to them. Let me show you how the upload process works. This, by the way, is very similar for Dropbox and MS OneDrive. I'm just using Google Drive as an example because it is free, and Gmail is something that is used by a lot of people, so I figured this would be the most commonly used one for everyone. If I want to add files here, I would go to the big New button that we have in the left-hand side. Now, you see a lot of choices. If you go a little lower, you see things like Google Docs, Sheets, Slides, Forms. Those options are if you would want to use the Google Docs tools to create files here on the cloud and edit them, work with them to make the equivalent of Microsoft Word documents or Microsoft Excel sheets or PowerPoint slideshows to do presentations. Whatever you want to create, you can using these tools. That is a little bit outside the scope of today's class. We do have a class on Google Docs here in our videos. So if you're interested in that, there's a lot more to learn about it and a lot of fun to be had. But today we're just going to talk about storing the files and being able to get at them. So you see options here at the top. If you wanted to organize your files, you could create a folder that would allow you to have, say, all of your work files in one location, all of personal records in another, or if you wanted to separate things out for side jobs that you do, or if more than one person uses the account, you can make multiple folders for that. If you want to simply upload things from the computer, you can choose File Upload or Folder Upload. If I choose File Upload, it allows me to browse to whatever I like. Now, one fun thing with this, you can see that when I work remotely on these classes, I will be using file sharing to grab these files and upload them to the cloud and then share them with our marketing department, who will then publish them on the website. And so I could grab part of today's class and open this up. And you can see, because it's a relatively large file, it's going to take a couple minutes to go. And you see it's working on that and slowly copying this to the cloud. On the other hand, if I take a smaller file, when I go to File Upload, if I go to All Documents and grab, say, this chores chart, I upload that, and that's already done. So that was uploaded very quickly, whereas this file is still in progress. That doesn't mean that it's not working or doing anything wrong. It's just a larger file, and it takes a while. Now, if I had instead gone to New and chosen Folder Upload, I could then choose an entire folder and upload all of the contents of that. Say upload that. And you see it uploads an entire folder. So if you had a lot of things stored, maybe you took a whole bunch of pictures and you had them stored on a computer and you wanted to upload them to this, you can do that. And then you could share that folder with other people. We'll go over how to do that in just a moment. It's still in the process of uploading them, so we'll let that go for a second there. You can see the advantage of this. You can quickly grab whatever you want and pull it into the cloud and be able to either display it here, share it with other people, or if you're done with it, I could select this and I could choose to send it to the trash. I went to the trash there. My mistake. Sorry about that. I would need to right click on this and choose remove, and then it goes to the trash. And now I could right click on this and restore it, or delete forever if I wanted it gone. I will restore it and it goes back to my drive. Now you see other options that are available here. When I right click on this, I can take a preview of it. That means do a quick look. That shows me the file. I can share this with other people. I'll show you how to do that in just a moment. I can move it to a different folder stored within here if I wanted to. Add it to starred. That's essentially a bookmark or creating one of your favorites list so you can quickly get back to the files that you want. You might wonder why you would do that. Well, if you find that yourself using something like Google Drive quite a bit, you might build up a lot of files here and you might have a lot to sift through. So adding the ones that you routinely use to your favorites list can be a big time saver. You can rename it if you want to change the names of it here. View more details of it. That would be when was the file uploaded, things like that. Make a copy. If you're wondering why you would make a copy, one of the reasons that you would do this is when you are working with things on the cloud, unlike when you're working in, say, Microsoft Word, you don't have to save your work. As you go, all the changes you make are automatically saved. Normally, this is a very good thing, but occasionally you have issues with that because you make changes and then you want to go back to the way it was before, and that's difficult to do because it's already saved the changes. So if you're going to be tinkering with something and you're not sure if you want to keep the changes that you made, perhaps you're thinking of updating a resume or changing around a possible vacation plan, but you want to keep the original there as well, make a copy first and then make changes to the copy. That way you have both of them and you don't lose the original if you need it. Report abuse is something that you would do if people shared with you something that was inappropriate or threatening or offensive. That goes back to what I talked about before, how you can share files with people. So people can share them with you as well. And if all of a sudden you receive something shared that should not have been sent to you, you could report abuse and then that would be reported to Google about the other person's behavior. Download is if you wanted to save this to your computer. So if you had made changes or you went to a new computer or a new location and then you wanted to save it, perhaps because it was easier to print or to make changes with there, you would download it and then save it to that computer. And then finally, I already showed you the remove option. That's the equivalent of deleting something. So that's how you would get rid of it. Now up here at the top, you see Open With. That again is getting into Google Docs, which is a little bit beyond what we're planning on talking about today. But this is what you would use if you wanted to edit the files working within the Google Drive here. That's going to be different from different systems. Microsoft Office has similar options to that if you're using the OneDrive in Microsoft Office and the cloud tools that are built in there. Dropbox doesn't offer nearly so many editing options as you would get with Google and Microsoft, but there are other choices out there. Now, I do want to talk about sharing files because this is one of the big pluses of working with the quick storage solutions. When you choose to share a file, you have two options here. You can either get a link or share it directly with somebody or a group of people. When you're getting a link, that's usually something you would do if you wanted to post this in a public location for people to get to. So say, for example, I wanted to share the outline for today's class on the Bloomingdale Library webpage. I could create a link and then I could go here to the library's webpage and under programs, computer classes, and down here in the list of classes, you would see at the bottom a link for cloud storage, and that link would take you to the outline for today's class. So that's when you would be creating a link, when you want to share something with a group of people. And looks like as I was talking, it finished uploading that video. So now we have that there. So that's the idea of getting a link. Maybe you want to post something on Facebook so that everybody can get to quickly there. Maybe you want to add it to your website. Maybe you want to send it out on Twitter or other social media. That's what the links are for. Sharing, on the other hand, is when you want to directly send it to somebody via their email address or to a group of people if you have them put together in a group email address with your account. This works nicely in conjunction with Gmail. So if you already have the account set up to be shared and to be used with the email there, then you might have the contacts already in there and you could just simply type their names. So if I were to go to share here, I could then type in my work email address. When I choose to share it with somebody, you choose what do you want to give them the option to do. Do you want them to simply be able to look at the file? Do you want them to be able to make comments on it, or do you want them to be able to edit it? If you want them to simply look at it, say you're sharing a bunch of pictures that you took with someone, you could choose viewer, and then they'd be able to see the pictures that you had without having to make any changes to them or being able to make any changes to them. Commenter is nice if you're asking for suggestions or help with something. Maybe you wrote something and you have a friend who can edit it for you, but you don't want them to actually make the changes. You just want to hear their ideas. You want them to be able to suggest changes. When you're working with a group of people, this is often helpful because otherwise things can get changed over and over again. Often here at the library, we will have publications that we are putting out, and it will be sent to everybody that is contributing to it, and everyone can look it over and add their comments or corrections, and then the person that is compiling them will take all of that together and make the changes themselves. So you all have input, but you don't have the ability to make changes and overwrite each other's work. And finally, editors, if you want to give people free range to make whatever changes they want, so they can update it themselves. This is nice if you're working collaboratively with somebody. Say, for example, my spouse and I, when we're traveling together and we're planning something out, I'll send an itinerary to her and she will be able to make changes to it or update it as she sees fit. So this can be a nice tool for collaborating with somebody. When you are adding somebody and you've typed in their email address, it can sometimes be nice to put in a message to let them know what it is that you're sharing with them or what you want them to do. You could perhaps say, please help me with this, look this over, whatever is appropriate for the file that you are sharing. And you notice the checkbox for notify people means actually send them an email to let them know that they're receiving it. That's generally a good idea. Otherwise, they might not know to look for this file. Now, you might be wondering, do you have to use Gmail to have a file shared with you? This, of course, is stored in a Gmail location in a Google Drive space in your Gmail account, but you don't have to be a user of Gmail to have this file shared with you. Somebody can simply follow the link and it will open it up in a Gmail location that they only have access to the specific files that you've shared. So you might have 1,000 files on your drive, but if you share 4 of them with them, they will only be able to see and work with those 4, even though they don't have Gmail. So you can share these things with anybody. Now I send this, and it was sent on its way. You might hear a ding in a minute or so when my email grabs that and receives the notification. If you are sending it to somebody else that uses Gmail and has a Google Drive of their own, they would be able to see that file in these shared with me when they come here. So you can see files that have been shared specifically with them. If they don't have Gmail and they just have another email address where they're receiving that, they would have to hold on to the link that you sent them to be able to get back to that. So that's one of the big advantages of the cloud storage locations where you can quickly upload files, download them, and share them with other people. It allows for working collaboratively and sharing a lot more information. You might wonder, why would you do this instead of just emailing somebody the files? What's the advantage of doing this over using email? We've all used email for 20 years. Why change over to this? Well, a couple of big differences. Remember the example I gave earlier where I'm going to share this first file that I have for our class today with marketing and allow them to work with it? This file is too big for email. Email has storage capacity limits, and it would not allow me to send it over that. And for that reason, I could not email this file. So that is a limitation there. Another advantage of doing it this way is that when you email somebody a file, they are receiving a copy of it. But when you share something that you have stored in your Google Drive, you're both working on the same file. So when they make changes, it automatically changes the one that you see as well, instead of it being 2 separate ones where they make updates to it, send it back to you, and then you have to update your own copy. This way, it's one file stored in one location, and you are both editing the same thing. So that can be a big time saver. So for a quick review of these online storage and sharing solutions, how they work: you have to connect to a cloud location where you have an account. You either log in through the browser, or if you have this installed as an app on your phone or your mobile device, then you would be able to go to it directly there. So if you have an Android or iPhone and you install Google Drive on it, there will be a little icon representing that app. You will press on it with your finger and it will open up and show you the files that are stored there. You can also install Google Drive on your home computer. There are some situations where that makes sense. It will essentially create a drive as if you had plugged in a USB drive there. I generally recommend against it. That can be process intensive for the computer because it is constantly trying to sync with the cloud location. That can slow down your internet traffic for other activities. I am a pretty thorough user of Google Drive. I keep a lot of things that I use every day in that location, and I choose not to do that on my computer because I don't like the performance and how it works out for the files. You do have that option. If that's something that you prefer, you can explore that. I recommend against it for personal use. Now, once you are connected to that cloud location where you have the account, you log in through the browser and you can access the files as we have demonstrated here. You can choose to sometimes edit them within the location. You can download them if you want. You can share them with other people, and you can upload new things using the new button there. If you are using the Google Chrome browser, you can drag and drop files directly to this, and that will work just fine. Firefox and Microsoft Edge will work to a degree with that, but they don't work quite as smoothly. Google makes their products designed to work well with their own products, and so that's kind of their way of controlling that. And so if you're using other browsers, if you prefer Firefox or anything else, you might want to make sure you use the new button to upload files or folders rather than dragging or dropping into the empty space here. The advantages of this choice, or one similar to it, are that it's free or low cost. I haven't talked about the storage space yet. I'll talk about that in just a moment. It has sharing options for collaboration, which can be a nice plus. And it allows some editing of and development of files and built-in tools with the built-in tools that are there. Disadvantages are you have a lower storage capacity than the things we're going to talk about next, at least for the lower cost options. And it can be very difficult or impossible to automate, so you can't have it automatically back up things that are on your computer. And that's a big deal if you're looking to back up a lot of things. What I would recommend as a use case for this is if you don't have a lot of stuff on your computer that you want to back up, maybe you don't take a lot of pictures or have a lot of files, but you do have some key important things and you want to make sure you don't lose them, tossing a few of them onto the Google Drive here is not a big deal, doesn't take too much time, and it can cost you nothing if you use a free account. And that can be a nice way to store just some key things that you would be worried about losing. What I tell people when I have in-person classes for these is I say, as you're sitting here right now, if you were to go home and find that your computer was up in smoke, what would you be most upset about losing? Those things you should immediately toss into a location like this just to have a backup copy of them in case something happens to your location at home, just so you have that safe. Now, before we leave this, I want to talk about one last thing, the storage options. I mentioned earlier that you start out with 15 gigabytes free with Google Drive for anybody that has a Gmail account. If you find that you like this service and you want to have more storage space, you can go to Buy Storage. By the way, these options are similar for Dropbox or for OneDrive or many of the other options that are out there. They all have their own pricing schemes or limits that they set, but they're all available. Now you can see recommended plans, and they have 100 gigabytes for $1.99 a month. That's quite a bit more than 15 gigabytes and a relatively small price increase. I have no vested interest in Google, sad to say. I am not telling you whether or not you want to use this or what's right for you. When talking about this in class, I will often remind people that we sometimes get in the mindset of expecting these things to be free to the point that we limit ourselves in what we can get for a relatively low price. And if you find yourself constantly butting up against the 15 gigabytes and having to delete files or move things around because you're having problems keeping under that limit, maybe consider whether it might be worth spending $2 a month to not have any concerns with that. This will go for iCloud as well when we talk about that later as another option. And you see you can go a little further, up to 200 gigabytes for $2.99 a month. And you can keep going up to 2 terabytes, which is quite a large amount of storage space, for $10 a month. And there are actually, you can go to get more storage if you're running a business that has a huge amount of files. Maybe you're a professional photographer or videographer and you have a large number of big files to store, and you can get some really huge storage spaces available to you. So those are your options that you have there. Hope you found that helpful and interesting. There is no cost to get started with this, so I would consider trying this out and seeing how you like it right away. All you need is a free Gmail account, and you can give that a try. But that doesn't mean that you don't want to consider the next options that we're going to talk about, which are the automated backup systems that you can install on your computer or mobile device. So with that, let's move over to those. Okay, let's take a look at some of the systems that you can install on your computer or mobile device to back up everything that you have there or at least a large number of files if you're interested. I'm going to show you Backblaze. This is one of the many options out there. I've used a number of different options in my personal life and working with the library. They all work more or less the same, But if you're interested in something like this after we talk about it, I would recommend you take a look at some of the PC Mag reviews or CNET or any of the other companies out there that do annual reviews of some of the best cloud storage options that are available to you. You can read 5 different sites of top 10 lists or top 5 lists or whatever they offer and see 10 different choices that are available. But as you go through all of these, you'll see some consistent ones appear again and again, and you might want to consider going with some of those. Now, the way it works is you install a program onto your computer. So after you read those reviews, if you decide, you know what, I have a lot of files on my computer I don't want to lose, let's be safe with this, I'm going to start paying $5, $7, whatever it is per month to have a little bit of security and have all of these backed up to another location. You would then create the account. So you would sign up, you would give a means of payment, usually a credit card, and you would install the program onto your computer and or your phone or tablet, whatever you choose to use. By the way, when I say computer, I mean desktop or laptop. Those both work the same. Mobile devices are a little bit different, but most companies now offer services for computers and mobile devices, so you should be covered there. Once you have installed that program, it's going to ask you some questions. It's going to ask you, what folders do you want to back up? Maybe you want to back up the entire computer, and you could say so, and it will back up everything on there. If you're using a service that has a storage capacity limit, you might not want to do that because you're backing up things like, say, the Windows folder that would be part of a basic installation for any computer, and you wouldn't necessarily need or have trouble retrieving if everything was lost on your computer. The idea of backup is to be able to get back the things that you would not be able to get otherwise. Typically, these are personal documents, photos, videos, any records that you would want to be able to get back that you wouldn't be able to retrieve. So while you are certainly welcome to back up everything that's on the computer, including the installed programs and the operating system and all the other stuff that helps the computer work, it is not as necessary as backing up your personal documents and records that you would not be able to get anywhere else if something happened to your computer. So that would be my first area of focus, especially if you were dealing with a situation where you had a limited amount of space to back things up to. But that again depends on your choice. Now, once you have told it what you want to back up, it will ask, when do you want to have this back up? You might think, more often the better. Let's back this up all the time and make sure that we have everything there. One thing you might want to consider is that does take processing power and data flow over the internet for you. So if you either have a not great internet connection or you have a slower computer, you might want to have it back up a little bit less often, and you might want to schedule to do that backup in the middle of the night or at some time when you're not likely to be using the computer. Because it will, if it is copying a lot of files from your computer to the cloud, that will take a little bit of the space that would normally be used for being able to stream TV or browse the internet or play a game online or whatever you would like to be using with your data flow. So something to be cautious about. More isn't always better if it interferes with the other use of your computer or other devices in your home. Once you have selected all those things, it will begin the initial backup. Now, the initial backup takes a while. Most services will notify you that that could take 2 or 3 days because it's backing up typically a lot of stuff on your computer. If it's a brand new computer and you haven't taken a lot of pictures yet or uploaded a lot of files to it, maybe this won't take very long. But typically, this is a large amount of files that you're backing up, and it's creating an initial record of them, which means it has to copy every single one. Once it's done that initial backup, it will start only backing up files that are new or have been changed. And so, as you can see here, an example that it has for this, I have 323,527 megabytes with 138,243 files. But remaining files to back up is 0 with 0 bytes because there have not been any changes or updates. So it does not need to back anything up there. If I had instead copied 20 pictures onto the computer, then maybe it would have to upload 20 more things from the computer to the cloud. It depends on changes that you have made. So typically, it's a relatively quick process and it will happen continuously. The nice thing about these services is that they work without you telling them to. Any security system that is dependent on people to remember to do the process all the time is one that is likely to have problems. And so it's nice to have these things automated where the computer will just every night at 2 in the morning or every Sunday at 5 a.m. or whenever you schedule it to be, will just run through the process and back everything up. Once you do that, you have it there waiting for you to come back and get it if you want. Now, if you choose to restore something that you have backed up, you can go to that option using whatever system you choose. All of them will be slightly different. Just like if I was teaching an email class and I was showing you how to use Gmail and you raised your hand and said, but I use Yahoo, it looks a little different on mine. I would say, yes, absolutely it does. Every service is a little bit different, but they all work in more or less the same way. They'll have similar menus, similar options available, and you're going to see that with the backup choices as well. So if you sign up for, say, iDrive instead of Backblaze, and you go through the restore process, don't be shocked that it doesn't look exactly like this. But be aware that you're going to find things that are very similar as you go through this. Now, I'll mention some key differences that might come up as we go through this process, but just wanted you to be aware of that. So, when you choose to bring something back, maybe you deleted it off your computer and you realize you needed it back, maybe your computer crashed and you're putting things onto a new hard drive or a new computer, whatever the situation may be, you need to get these files and you have to tell the computer using Backblaze what you want to get. So we're saying from our location, from what is stored here, how do we want to bring this back to be able to use it again? First choice that we have here at the top, download, you notice in parentheses it says free. That means there's no cost, of course, for this, and that's what we would typically do. The other options are things that you would use if it was a very large amount of data and you needed it faster, then you would be able to download it over the internet. So this would be they send you out a USB flash drive or they send you out a hard drive to your location and you're able to copy it manually that way. This is particularly useful if you lived somewhere where you had a slow internet connection and you had a large amount of files that you needed to copy over. You can see up to 8 terabytes. So that's something that, again, maybe a business that had a huge amount of backup space would want to do, because if I'm downloading 100 gigabytes of pictures, that might take a couple of hours, maybe even take a day if I have a slow location. If I'm downloading 5 terabytes of files for my business, that might be more than a week, and maybe I need things faster than that. And so you might consider these options if you had an urgent need for the information that was on this location. But if you're just trying to get back some files that you need and you need them back, but you don't need them back today or tomorrow, downloading them is usually just fine. If we're talking about individual files or an individual folder or a couple hundred pictures or whatever it may be, when I'm saying today or tomorrow, it'll be 20 minutes. It's a relatively quick process, but this is for larger amounts of files that you need to copy a huge number of things over. The save files to B2, by the way, is a zip format. It's a way of downloading things that are compressed together a little bit more than normal. So that's kind of a medium in between the free download and the having a device sent to your home. Now, once I have said what I want, again, typically we'd use the free process. We go down here and we choose what files we want to restore. Now, this is an interesting feature that not all services offer. You can go through and you can choose what date you want the files from. So say I deleted something 2 days ago and I realized that I needed it back, but there's been a backup since then. I couldn't use today's backup to get those files that I deleted because they're not there. So what I could do instead is I could click on the calendar and I could go back to Saturday and select that. And you see it changed the date from 5/3 to 5/1. Now I would click go and it will update. You see it's loading it up there. It will update the files and folders that are available. And there we go. Now, once I have done that, I could go to wherever these files are stored that I want. I can look inside of the program data folder and say, I need all of the Mozilla files. I could check that box, and you see that will get me the updates and other files that are stored in there. If instead of an entire folder, I want an individual file, maybe I could go into the users and check documents and say, I want the book form there. And once I've selected all of the files that I want, You see, if you have multiple drives, you can go onto the other drive there. I can go onto the D drive if I wanted instead of the C drive. If you have a situation where you have more than one drive on your computer that's being backed up, I'll stick with what we have here. And then it tells me how much storage space is being used for these files. You see 13.74 megabytes. That is a very small amount, so this is not going to take long at all. And I press continue with restore. And it is now preparing a restore that I will be able to download. So you see here one of the big differences between these systems and something like Google Drive. You can't immediately grab the files and save them to your computer because they are stored in a way that they need to be decompressed and prepared for them to be accessible to you. This is part of the cost of having a large amount of storage for a low amount of money. They make the files relatively difficult to get to. That again was a small backup that we were doing here. So if I go to my restores, I won't be surprised at all to find if it's ready. Now, look, there it is. So you see 14.41 megabytes. It ended up being a little bit more than they expected. And I can choose download, and it will now save it to the computer. I choose download there. And it has now saved that to the computer. Once I've done that, I could choose to remove this from my list if I wanted, or I could leave it there and it will stay for a couple of days. If I were to go back and view and restore some more files, there would be another backup available here, and I would be able to download another group of files. If you want to hold on to these things, you can rename them so you remember what files are stored in it, because of course Dell laptop is just telling me the name of the computer that it's on, and it's telling me the date of when I backed it up, and that isn't necessarily very helpful for me to remember exactly what it is that I backed up. So you can give this a name that would tell you that it was the Mozilla files that I chose to restore there, or whatever is appropriate with that. Now, I go back to view restore files. And it's slowly loading here. Finally, if you have more than one computer on your account, this is a choice that you would make when you're setting up the account. You can click there and you can switch from one computer to another. And you can go and take a look at the files on the other computer. And I say go. And it's loading them up. And then you would see a different bunch of files here. So, to review, there are a lot of services out there that offer this. As I mentioned, read through a lot of the reviews before you decide what you're going with, because this is something that you have to pay for to use, although a lot of them will have a free 1-month trial or 2-week trial. But a lot of the popular ones out there are iDrive, pCloud, Sync.com, Backblaze. All of these companies have been around for a while and are fairly well reviewed. And so you can take a look at them and decide what you want to work with yourself. When you create an account, you then are going to install this on whichever computer or device that you want to back it up on. Things to look for. When you are choosing what service you want to go with, think about what it is you want to back up. Do you have everything in one location? So is everything on one computer? In that case, you'd want a service that has unlimited storage space, but only allows a single device. If, on the other hand, you have a smaller number of files that would spread across a couple different computers, in the example that I showed here where we have more than one computer, maybe you and your spouse have each have your own computers and your own files, and you want to back up both of them to one account. Maybe you have things on a mobile device as well as a computer, and you want to back up both of those. Then you might want a service that offers you a storage amount that you can pay for, but you can have it on as many devices as possible. You can see that when you read the descriptions of them and read the comparisons of them on places like CNET or PC Mag that are out there that will give you reviews. So I'd encourage you to check that out and think about what works better for you. Now, once you have selected one of these and you have installed it and you are backing things up, whenever you need to get a file, whether because you deleted it or maybe you made an update to it that you don't like and you want to go back to the other version, or because something more catastrophic happened and you lost either your entire computer or a large number of files, or because something good happened. One of the pluses for this is that you can use this as a migration tool. If you buy a new computer and you want to move everything from your old computer to that, you could copy things one by one onto a USB drive and then plug that USB drive and copy them to the new computer. Or you could sign on to the new computer and choose to download everything that you want from the cloud location. If it's already backed up there, why copy it again? You already have it in another location. You can quickly copy it that way. So that can be very helpful. That goes along with the other advantages we've already discussed of it being automated, so it's less likely to forget to do anything or to lose any files. The cost is relatively low depending on what service you go with and how many computers you're backing up. You're typically talking about $5 to $10 a month, which isn't nothing, but it's, you know, compared to the cost of computers and the cost of having to lose everything that you have stored, can be a relatively small expense. It's accessible anywhere in the world because, again, it is accessible through the internet, so you can get to it anywhere as long as you have your username and password with you. And as I just mentioned, it can be a useful tool for migration. The disadvantages are there are usually either a size limit for the amount of storage space or a device count limit for how many devices you have in there without having to add to the expense. So if it costs $5 for one computer, it might cost $10 for two, and so on as you add more and more devices. And it can be somewhat complicated to access the files as opposed to the more straightforward options that we have seen when we simply go to the Google Drive or um, Microsoft OneDrive or places like that, and we can see the file right in front of us and say download, and then it's on your computer almost instantly. So it's a little bit more of a process with these, but there are advantages in the other direction. Now with that, I want to talk about quickly a couple of other features that are out there. I mentioned these at the start, kind of specific or a little bit of an oddball options that are available, but that are used by a lot of people. These are tools that either have a niche that they work with or have a certain feature that they are very good for, but they don't work with much else. The first example that I want to give is iCloud. If any of you are Apple users, either an iPhone, iPad, or simply a Macintosh computer, then you are probably familiar with iCloud already. It is a very useful tool for backing up Apple devices. It's essential for backing up things like the settings on your iPhone and all of the program data and things that make it work. When I teach classes on iPhones, I strongly encourage people to have the backup settings, back up everything that's on there. Where it gets a little bit more complicated is when you have it automatically backing up your photos as well. That is something similar to when we were talking about the Google Drive, where it gives you a free amount of space, but the iCloud space that it gives you is very limited. Almost everybody that uses it extensively needs to purchase more space, or they are constantly butting up against the lower limit for space. It's, again, relatively cheap to expand the space for iCloud, so it's something you might want to consider doing, but it is still a limit and it's something that you need to consider. One of the tricky things with that is if you have iCloud set to sync amongst your devices, what they mean by sync is to synchronize, which means it will try to make identical storage situations on your phone, your iCloud storage space, and if you have any other Apple products that it is syncing up with, a tablet, computer, whatever it may be. What that means is if you delete something from one location, it's removed from all the locations. So you want to be very careful of that if you have the synchronizing set up, which most people do, because the idea of it is that when you take a picture with your iPhone or you save a picture to your computer, it's automatically backed up to the iCloud so you don't lose it, which can be a great feature and very helpful. But the danger is that you start to run out of space and you think, oh, I'll delete this, and you don't realize that it's also removing it from your computer. There are ways to work around this. You can copy it to another location first so you don't lose it, but better to be aware of it and be safe. So I like to mention that all the time. Um, Advantages of iCloud, in addition to it working very smoothly with the Apple products, it does a lot of smart tagging and inventorying, so you can search for specific people or specific dates or categories of things, and you can pull up all the pictures that you might have or all the files you might have related to different topics. So it can be very efficient with that. That's a very popular feature among users. Um, Primarily, though, it is something that is essential when working with Apple products and optional and usually not chosen for people that are working with either Android phones or Windows computers. Now, something similar is Google Photos. Google Photos has, well, some similarities and some differences. One similarity is that it is very popular with a certain kind of device. If you use an Android phone, very likely you use Google Photos as well. I have access to Google Photos here as well as part of your Google Drive account. So you can use it just through the browser on the computer, and many people do as a place to upload and store their photos. One of the reasons that Google Drive, little subset Google Photos, was so popular for so long is that it had been a free service for many, many years. Sad to say that is changing this year. In fact, this summer, they are changing the rules that go along with Google Photos, and they're going to start charging for storage space. So that is something that you'd want to consider if you have a lot of things stored there. You might want to find other locations to store them or plan for that to become an expense that you have to pay. It'll be a relatively low expense, similar to talking about the iCloud or the Google Drive expansion, but it's still more than nothing. So that's something to be aware of. That being said, Google Photo does work very smoothly with Android phones in the same way that iCloud works with iPhones, where it automatically backs things up when you take the pictures, and so you don't lose anything that way. It also allows for creating albums and searching and all of the same things that you would do within the iCloud. So nice option there. One of the interesting things that Google Photos does is that by default, when it uploads pictures there, it will slightly reduce the quality to save you on storage space. So that'll be more and more important as they're going over to a charging model where they are paying, or where you are paying for the amount of storage space that is given. Just something to be aware of, that if you are a photographer that wants to keep really high quality photos, you might want to store them somewhere else in addition to Google Photos, because it is saving reduced quality versions of those when you upload to them. Now, another service that I wanted to mention here is Amazon Web Services. I'm sure we're all familiar with Amazon and the many services that they offer. We're used to them as a shopping outlet, but actually Amazon's web services for website hosting and cloud storage is a huge part of their business. Some of their large scale cloud storage is very popular for businesses to use. It's very low priced, but it is relatively difficult to access and to set up. So it's not something that's very popular with home users. However, they are starting to get into the home users market. And one of the things that they're doing is they are creating a Amazon Photos option that is available for a lot of people. I suspect it's not a coincidence that they are pushing this hard at the same time that Google Photos is changing their policies and starting to charge people. But right now, if you are an Amazon Prime member, they do have Photos available for you where you can install it on your phone and it will back up the photos for free. I'm not endorsing this. I'm not saying that you should or should not do that. I'm just saying it is a new feature that has become available over recent years, and they are pushing it harder now, which, in light of the news that I just gave you about Google Photos, seems like a bit of a coincidence to me. Amazon Photos works in a lot of the same ways that iCloud and Google Photos does, and it is designed to be searchable and quickly download things to your computer if you want to. It's also has built-in display tools, so if you have a smart TV at home, you can use that as a way to show galleries just like you can with iCloud and Google Photos. I do think that Amazon is doing a bit of a push more than the other products out there to make it directly marketable to printing and sending things for development through their photos. That seems to be something that they are trying to make as frictionless as possible with their setup there. But just something that I wanted you to be aware of when we're considering the different features that are available. There are, as I said, a lot of backup options with Amazon Web Services. They have their Glacier option where you store things for long term. They have other backup choices with a wide range of prices that are out there. But take a look at what's available. Consider the photos if you're looking for an alternative to Google Photos because of the pricing changes. Especially if you already use Amazon Prime, you have that feature already, so you might as well give it a shot. But with that, I hope this was helpful. If you have any further questions about cloud backup, we'd be happy to hear them in the lab. If there are any classes that you'd like to see, please let me know. With that, have a good night.